Good morning. It is not too early in the morning here, but early enough for me, and I am going to be transferring the sketch for an illustration onto this watercolour block. And I've already started a little bit, so I'll get into showing you that in a moment. But what I've been doing is I've been revisiting some of my Inktober's, some of the ideas that I did for Inktober back in 2022. And that was when I was first kind of posting on social media. And I've started off with the day one for that year, which was the prompt greetings. And if any of you remember that, it was this image of a woman with a dragon, and I have redesigned that. I've made the dragon more serpentine, and I'm going to, based on a couple different snakes, and I'm going to actually design what this dragon looks like as well at some point. And since most of this pose was from imagination, the outfit I pulled from a few different references at the time, but trying to come up with the hand was definitely a struggle point. So you can see that I redid it a bunch. I studied my hand as well. So one really good thing about pursuing your ideas, say you have an idea come up in your mind, but you're not sure if you are good enough for it yet. If you do it, then you can see areas that you struggle with, and then you can go off and study those things. So I just kept going with what it would look like. I reminded myself that I need to do these things. I then told myself that I need to study hands. That's the thumbnail for the positioning on this watercolor block. So I know now from doing this that I need to go off and study hands some more, especially in this kind of upward pose, and where there's like, you can see some of the palm. That's what I was struggling with, was showing the palm. You can see some of it, but it's heavily obscured. So that was the base of this illustration. And now I'm transferring it. And by transferring, I just mean I'm sketching it again using my 0.7mm pencil. And this is 2B lead. Sometimes I use HB, sometimes I use 2B. It just depends on what I feel like using at the time and what I feel like suits the paper. So this is hot press paper, and it's also my first time using a Saunders Waterford hot press block and hot press paper. So I've used Saunders Waterford cold press in the past. I've used the sheets, but I've never used their blocks, and I've never used their hot press cotton paper. So this is going to be a fun little experiment. So far it has been gorgeous to draw on, so I'm really excited to get into the inking and watercoloring of this. But what I've done is I have marked off 1 centimetre along the edges, because I tend to do that whenever I know I'm going to be hitting the edge of an illustration. So the smoke, which I am going to redesign from the sketch again, I think, but the smoke is going to go up and it's going to reach some of this. And then the snake as well, the snake dragon, is going to be coming in from the side here, and her dress is going to finish down here. So we have at least 3 edges that are going to have the illustration go all the way up to the edge. So that means I'm going to have to mask it off with some masking tape or some painting tape. And that's where we're at with this right now. While you are watching me sketching here, I'm going to be answering a question that I got over on Instagram and also talk a little bit about my thought process behind creating the videos that I am making for this illustration and why I'm intentionally taking a slower approach with them compared to videos I've done before, and especially compared to videos that you generally see online when it comes to art and drawing and illustrations and all of that. First off, though, on Instagram recently there was a story that was being shared around where people could ask questions to artists. And I got a few of them asked to me and I answered them over there, but because of the format of the platform, you can't really answer them in much detail. So I thought that it would be nice to answer some of those questions over here, and then I can get into them a little bit more. And then that also means that you guys over here that aren't necessarily on Instagram can also hear the answer to the question as well. Starting with the first question that I got over there, I'll maybe do these in the rough order of when they were asked, but the first question was, do you draw in complete silence or do you listen to anything while you're drawing? And when I answered this question, I of course had to give a very condensed down version of my answer, which was that it's a bit of both depending on what I am drawing and the stage of the drawing or painting that I'm in. Music has always been heavily linked to me emotionally and creatively. I am one of those people who, when I listen to music, I either feel emotions very heavily or I can process my emotions, or I end up imagining entire scenarios, stories, characters when listening to the music. And because of that, music is a very important part of my creative practice. I'll listen to it while I'm coming up with ideas, or I will come up with ideas while listening to it. I will listen to music while I'm drawing, but that being said, there are some instances where I need complete silence while I'm drawing. I usually need complete silence when I need to heavily focus, and that's usually during problem solving stages. And the problem solving stages are usually closer to the start of an illustration or a drawing or a painting or whatever I might be doing, even sketching. Sometimes I might be really focused and trying to problem solve something that I am hitting a wall with, say in my studies as an example, and I might need just complete silence while I'm figuring that out. But as a general rule, the very first stage of the creating and usually involves music, and then the rendering and all of that stage usually always involves music, but then the stage between those two might need complete silence, or a stage between those two might need complete silence. When it comes to the music itself, because it's so heavily tied to like my creativity, emotions, and so on and so forth, I am inspired by a bunch of different genres. And it's a mixture of my musical preferences, the genres I just prefer listening to, and then also just songs that I come across from any genre that are inspiring to me in some way. It'll be a song that either connects to me emotionally, it brought out some emotions in me, or it'll be one that interests me in some way, or it may have sparked a creative idea or ideas while I listen to it. It can be any one of those things or more. And I actually have an entire playlist that's essentially a variety pack of different songs that just jump wildly from genre to genre. And they're all in there because in some way they connected to me or they inspired me. And that can be one way. that I'll be listening to the music is because of a particular song. Or in another way, I might be listening to my preferred music. And generally, my preferred genres are rock, metal, and synthwave, typically. And within rock and metal, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of subgenres. And I like listening to almost all of them pretty much. The main thing is just whether or not a song connects to me or interests me or inspires me in some way. And then I will more than likely have it on my playlist or listen to it. I will usually have the songs that I prefer listening to on when I'm doing things like the rendering. I suppose I'm trying to think now whether or not that's necessarily the case. I think most of the time it's the case, but there might be some instances where I narrow those songs down to songs that are specifically helping me at that point in time, either with the illustration or with focusing my mind, if that makes sense. Some people will form like a habit with how they draw where they'll sit down and they have to almost go through this like ritual in order to get themselves started with whatever they're doing. It can be as simple as when you're getting ready to draw for the day, you always go make a cup of tea. It's always in your favorite mug. You set it down at your desk. You always have your sketchbook out ready on your desk. You gather up all your materials and then you do this, 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 and this, and then you start drawing. And you almost settle into like a rhythm of doing that. And I have music usually part of that stage for me. So there's usually some music that will be in my rotation at that point in time that I almost have as part of my getting ready to draw habit. And I'll be listening to those every single day on repeat while they're in that sort of daily drawing rotation. And yeah, I've never actually thought about it that much before, so I'm almost kind of figuring out my habits while talking about this. It's kind of interesting to me at the same time. But yes, to answer that question, it is a mixture of both, but it is primarily listening to music apart from when I need to focus. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts behind this video and some of the musings I've been having recently regarding content creation and sharing my creative practice online. I was inspired recently by some creators in the sewing community on YouTube. One name in particular jumps out at me right now would be Kathy Hay. And the whole idea of slowing down. And I don't mean slowing down content creation. In fact, a lot of these people who are intentionally slowing down are creating the same amount of videos or sometimes even more videos than they were before. It's more about molding content creation around their creative practice instead of forcing their creative practice to fit the standard of content creation. And typically what happens is that when you have a project, it doesn't matter how long that project takes you. It could take you a day, it could take you 10 hours, it could take you 200 hours, it could take you a year. However long that project takes you, you take that project and you make a 15-minute video on average out of it. You make one video out of your project and then you make your next video. And instead of that, which does work for some people thrive off that whole idea. They make loads and loads of videos of one project per video and that works out really, really well for them. But it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone, and that's kind of the point. And there's been a shift towards recognizing that recently within different creative communities. And instead, these communities are, or people within these communities are taking their project and then breaking it down into multiple stages and taking people along for the ride, taking people along for the journey. And that's something that I want to experiment with, starting with this video. Not all of the videos are going to be like this, but I want to experiment a bit with taking you along for the journey of an illustration and being able to share more detail behind it with you rather than trying to fit 10 hours of footage into 15 minutes. I can instead take you along, like I did at the beginning, with my thought process, with the sketching process, the struggles I came across, the ups, the downs, my solutions to them, what I'm planning on doing next, how that ends up going. And you get to see more of the reality of it, but you also get to come along with me for it as well. And I want to see if that's a practice that will be beneficial, not just for me, but it might be interesting for people to see as well. I'm done with the pencil sketch. The scales definitely took the longest to do, but I really enjoyed doing all of the overlapping and trying to figure out where I wanted the scales to go as I was going along. And I haven't put in the smoke yet just because I want to A, decide if I'm going to have it in, and B, I want to decide the shape language I want to use for it as well. I know that when I go to ink this, which is going to be the next stage, I won't ink the smoke so that it's more intangible than everything else. It'll just be watercolor with pencil lines. But the basic idea is down now, and I can move on to designing the smoke and adding that in, and then doing the inking. Once the inking's done as well, I'll be doing some colour comps in watercolour to decide the colour scheme. I have a basic idea of the colour scheme of this outfit, but then I need to decide the other elements as well and what colours they're going to be so that it all fits together. And then once I've come up with that, I can get on with the watercolouring. So thank you for joining me for today's pencil session, and I'll see you next time. Bye!